Majority of African Americans that lived here.
Right, so this is going to be the second podcast I'll be doing with the new format for my videos. It's taking me a while. I just had to pause with all the publishing of videos. I just do a little thinking about the it's a multidisciplinary channel. My brand is multidisciplinary. My website is multidisciplinary. So there are some key areas of interest I have. I just can't see myself not touching on any of them at any point in time. It all depends on how I feel. So, and this has been like this for over almost 2 decades now. So I've come to accept that it's just impossible for me not to put out content based on all these key areas. So you'll see the layout of this new video podcast. You see that there are 4 key areas, and I believe those 4 key areas literally capture everything. Right, this particular episode I'm going to be talking about I'm going to play back a video. You'll listen to the gentleman speaking about the history of slavery in America and where the African Americans who are there today supposedly came from. Now, there are several narratives. The white slave masters claimed that they went all the way to Africa to ship in the Africans from Africa into America. However, there's always been this other school of thought, and they do have descendants right there in America, the Moors, okay, and then there's other blacks who have actually been there before this slavery incident actually happened. And many people don't know this history, by the way. I've done a lot of digging. It was when I was in Benin Republic. I had plenty of time on my hands whenever I was done with my work, and I did a lot of watching of videos, reading of stuff, and it is an incontrovertible truth. And you're going to hear him talk about Spain. I've told several people about what that blacks ruled Spain for about 700 years. Many people don't know that. It's not somebody just having some fanciful ideas. This is cemented in history. I'll let you listen to him, and then I'll come back and I'll give you a few closing thoughts.
Majority of African Americans that lived here were brought over here.
No,
that's
not economically sound.
What do you mean by it's not economically sound?
So what I'm saying is, people were already here. Does it make sense to go all the way to this other continent to bring people on a boat when we know that half of your stock is going to die? You wouldn't do that.
So how many people do you think were brought over from Africa on slave ships? Because that definitely happened.
I don't believe it.
What do you mean you don't believe it?
I don't believe that story. You think this whole land was empty? No, there were natives here.
Right.
But today we're taught that natives is some other people. No, natives are the melanated African being that has come here since the beginning of the Mali Empire. We're talking about 14th, 13th century. We had already come here from Africa.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We had already come here. Maybe people were brought over as slaves, but I don't think that the black people in America came from Africa on slave ships. I believe the people that were here were slowly conquered. First, they got the East Coast, and then they started spreading out west little by little, conquering. And when you conquer a tribe, what do? You enslave them. They're POWs. Right?
Okay.
That's what you do.
But I'm still confused. There's a great history of slave ships being brought over from Africa.
History is his story.
Right.
What about my story? Is my story not valid?
But if you do 23andMe from out
23andMe,
well, that's
either way. If you take black people here in America and you do their DNA sample and it point back to Africa, what does that say? It says black people in America are Africans. Now the argument is, were we brought here or were we already here? Did we bring ourselves here, or did the white man bring us here? You see, when you say the white man brought us here, what you're doing is you're removing our ability to transport ourselves. You're saying, oh, we didn't know anything about boats. That's what you're trying to tell me. You're trying to tell me that we didn't know that there was a landmass here. Go look at the primary source. You got here, we met black people. When we got the Caribbean, we met black people. You think the Caribbean is right next to America and they weren't in America?
That's interesting.
Doesn't make any sense. I mean, when you go and you look at real European history, right, would believe that if they took a bath, it was bad.
Right.
They didn't even want to change their clothes. They thought that dirty was purity. When we talk about the Moors going into Spain and into Europe, the stories in the history, our history, says that when we met the so-called Caucasian, he was sleeping in the barn with the animals, and we told him, no, you can't sleep in the barn with the animals. We taught them etiquette. We taught them running water. We brought that technology to Europe. Now, if we brought the technology to Europe that saved Europe from the Black Plague, you mean to tell me that if we saved the white race, that we weren't already in America already? When we brought the technology, when Rome was dependent on Africa for food? Remember when the Black Plague hit Rome? The cause was one of the officials was stealing the grain that was coming from Africa. So there was famine, hit Rome. If your source of sustenance is from Africa, how are you superior? You're not. You get your food from me. So if you get your food from me, who's more likely to travel this globe? Me, I'm the source of food. And that's the first thing you need to survive on this planet.
Now you've listened to what the man had to say. I'm sure you saw the way Joe Rogan himself was left speechless. I mean, this is the story we've heard again and again, but the economics of the transatlantic slave trade do not add up. It's never added up, but there was never really any concerted effort by those to whom the story was told to really challenge the theory, because nobody had any other information for the most part to the contrary. However, with access to the internet today, a lot of stuff that was previously exclusively available on paper is now available digitally. Like I said at the intro, I actually encountered material like this that talks about the fact that Columbus himself had a black navigator. The ancient Africans from Mali were seafaring experts. They went to different parts of the world. You go to Mexico, you see the Olmecs, you see the huge heads of these ancient Africans who traveled many thousands of miles all the way to that part of America, and you see the flat noses, big lips, clearly African. And yet they want you to believe that the Africans, they had no knowledge of anything, they had no civilization, they were just stuck in Africa, they don't know what to do. That's not true. You know, the Africans enslaved a lot of white people in the time. There's nothing good about it, but slavery was not something that was exclusive to white people. The blacks did it, you know. And like I said, in Spain was a very good place. How do I put it? Spain was the place where it was in the study of Spain and the history of Spain, the early history of Spain, the early kings of Spain, that I discovered that blacks had ruled that country. And it was very interesting to find out from that study that they were introduced to civilization, in quote, by the blacks. They never used to have their bath. You heard what the man said, that they thought not having your bath was equivalent to being pure. You know, and then they slept in the barn. Their kings were living in barns. You know, these structures you see in Spain today, a lot of them were influenced by the first structures that were constructed in Spain, and those structures were constructed under the guidance of the black rulers. You know, this is the way it was. One of the things they were noted for, the fact that they actually were the ones that introduced public baths. You know the saying, "Don't throw away the baby with the bathwater." Generally, it's supposed to derive from the fact that the way they used to have their bath, I think the man of the house, the patron of the house, would be the first to have his bath, and followed by all the other people in that kind of a hierarchy. And I think they said they used to bathe the babies last with the water was left, but there was shortage of water, and so the water would be so dark, so dirty, that the baby might be in the water and they might not know. So don't throw the baby away with the bath water. Was like, that was what used to literally happen in those days. I'm not sure if it's true, but that's one of the things I've heard. It's like an anecdote, but it tells you so much, doesn't it? How else could the baby be thrown away with the bath water if the water was clean? I mean, regarding the issue of having one's bath. I remember there was a time, I'm not sure if I read it. I think I read it. Yes, I read it. Somebody wrote somewhere, cannot remember exactly where, that Wole Soyinka was once interviewed that what were the things that stuck in his memory from the time he spent in England as a student. He was asked that question at some point. And Wole Soyinka said that one of the things he remembers most vividly was that a lot of the white people with whom he had to interact, they stank. You know what it means to stink? They stank. That's what one of the things Wole Soyinka reportedly said about his experience while he was in the UK. Isn't that interesting? Now, why would they stink? Because many of them, I mean, look, let's be honest. I've interacted with a lot of people from that part of the world. As far back as the 80s, I remember many of them had the tendency not to want to have their bath for several days on end. Maybe like over a period of 5 days, they might have their bath maybe once or twice. It's not like they did not often have their baths every day. Now, we in Africa, we grew up with understanding that you have your bath every bloody day. It comes from the history, you know. It's a tendency they have. It's a kind of an accepted way of life there. Clearly, I remember, I don't want to mention, a relative of ours came in from the UK. His mother is from somewhere in the UK, and he came over to visit and stopped over at our place and stayed with us several weeks. I remember he never used to have his bath every day, even though he was here with us in Africa. And I got curious about that. Though I was so young, I felt it would be rude to ask him. But it stuck with me that he did not have his bath every day. You would ask him, sea water and all that. And he would say, no. And he would have dressed up even before you all come in, and he would be on his way out with the driver. And it struck me that, okay, these guys come and they don't have their baths every day. Why is that? Because he was a what do you call a mixed breed, you know, half caste. So, and he looked more white than black anyway. So that's my point. So it's something that is not an exaggeration. There was a time when they considered it fashionable not to have their baths. Think about that, and then look at how they present themselves today. That tells you a lot. It was when the Roman Catholic Church began its what's that thing they did, that movement of war, whatever they did. That was when they began to attack all the strongholds where the blacks were in power, and then over time, it took them a while for they finally broke that last area where blacks were ruling. And then this thing happened where they did this collaboration to just turn black people into the rejected stone and all that, you know. But the history cannot be denied. It is left for those who are willing to do the work to go digging to learn the true history of the black race. When we say that black people were the ones that birthed the civilization that the white man built to what it is today, it's not a joke. It's true. You know, I've talked to people about videos by what's the name? The video titled "Return to Glory," in which one of the key people that was interviewed was then Dr. Ben Carson, now Professor Ben Carson, and you hear the stuff he had to say. Then there were other people that were talked to, you know, archaeologists and all that, who confirmed the fact that a lot of the stuff that we've been told about black people and ancient Africans was wrong. There have been excavations of the bodies of people from ancient Egypt, okay, and they found out that when they did the DNA analysis, the results showed that those people were black, much as the person who was giving that result and announcing to the journalists was not. It didn't sound quite enthusiastic. He said because it was contrary to what he was expecting. The videos, clips of that, I think I have a video on my channel too of that. So the point to be made here is this: as black people, we need to begin to research our history so we know ourselves better. Fela said that a long time ago. He said, "Black man, know thyself." It's one of the things that written at the tops of the temples in ancient Africa, when people like Socrates used to come all the way down from Greek to come and learn. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, who were the others? They all came. The Herodotus that called himself the father of modern medicine, it's a lie. It was Imhotep. They went and studied the scrolls they took from the tombs. You know, that's what they did. You know, it's important for us to understand who we are. Fela sang, Oyinbo no teach us nothing. Now we open them eye. Now we open them eye. Now 500 years slavery cause them. They meet us, they do plenty things. I say we teach them plenty things. No be me talk am, na books they talk am. No be the year book you they read for the year school for your town. Now those colonial school from that London, I'm telling you, now we open them eye. You see, the information is there. They outlawed the reading of books in America, especially by blacks. It was outlawed because they knew the black man read up. If he knew how to read, he would discover the truth because it was documented in text. There were newspaper reports, there were written books published that told the truth. Books published by learned scholars told the truth. So if a black guy could read, he would know the truth. But because it was only a minority of black guys that got to read, the truth did not spread. Till today, the truth has not spread because also we have succumbed to the pressure put on us psychologically to have disdain for the habit of reading. So a lot of black people do not enjoy reading, well, in this part of the world anyway. Reading, we are always into the physical arts, and it denies us the opportunity to discover who we are, to dig into our history, to understand better where we came from. The truth of the matter is that there's very great likelihood that what this man said in the video is true, because the economics of it do not add up. The millions of African Americans that are there, how did they get there? They couldn't have been transported across the seas. At what cost? What profit could have been obtained from that if half of the cargo was dying? Even if 1/4 of the cargo, human cargo, was ending up dead, how did that? The stress of taking those trips in those days, they didn't have aircrafts, they didn't have steam powered, well, they didn't have motor powered boats and all that. So how did they do it? It's impossible. These people must have been there procreating already. These black populations were already there in different parts of the Americas, and then what they did was to attack them and enslave them. Now the point is, we're not trying to dig up dirt and then attack white people. We're trying to say our young people need to understand, therefore, that indeed, if we were the one that civilized the white people, as people have many knowledgeable people, even white people have said, if we were the one that civilized the white people, it means we have just as much intellectual capability as they do. Not in question, it's clear. But we need to help our children to believe that. We need to raise them up with that understanding that they should not feel inferior to a white person or to people in white society. That they should understand that deep within themselves, all they need to do is introspect and develop their ability. It's there already. Genetically, we're not inferior. We need to help our children grow up with that understanding so that they know that they don't have to look outside of themselves for solutions. If we don't do that, what we're going to have is a population of young people who continue to think that they have to be second-class citizens to function because they cannot do as much as the other people have done, not knowing that their ancestors were the ones that gave those other people the edge they have today. It's important that we do this, and that's why I continue to publish stuff like this, because I have continued to expose my kids to it, and every time I meet with other people, I try to open their eyes to these truths. Fela Anikulapo Kuti opened my eyes to these truths, got me curious enough to investigate them, especially when I began to work with white people myself in the large multinational company I worked, and I began to ask myself questions. These guys are not smarter than we are. In fact, I noticed some not so good qualities in some of them, and I said, these guys are just as human as we are. So what makes them feel that they can be superior? Why do we think they're superior? And I began to question things. And by the time I had the opportunity to research it even a lot more, where I had 24-hour electricity and freedom from stress in Benin Republic, I found the truths. And from then, my life changed. My attitude changed completely to a lot of things, including white people. Because I knew nobody was superior to me, and I don't aim to be superior to anybody. Let's raise our kids to believe in themselves and to know who they are. If you have any questions about what I've shared with you in this podcast, reach out to me using the contact details on the screen. I wish you well.